Hi, I'm Stacie Monahan, a partner at Maestro Strategic Partners. We are a consulting and advising firm that works with primarily PI law firms all across the country. We work on everything from marketing and intake to exiting a firm. And as of late, we've been doing a lot of advising on technology and strategy.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Like I said, I think looking at the business of personal injury uh, law and the personal injury ecosystem is it's really an outlier when it's compared to the rest of the legal ecosystem. It's a contingency focused space. It's extremely entrepreneurial. And it's certainly fascinating to watch how it's evolving so quickly, particularly in this AI era that we are well and truly in the midst of, and I don't think is going to stop anytime soon or slow down. Just a housekeeping piece first. This is CLE accredited, so we have four keywords throughout the session. So everyone sticks around and gets their CLE credit. So the first one is transformation. So transformation is your first CLE code word for those in the audience. Take note, and then you can claim your credits. So in terms of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the key drivers and trends that are going on in personal injury, how AI is changing that ecosystem rapidly. We're going to talk about the role of data and analytics in driving analysis, risk assessment, business strategy, and litigation strategies. And we're going to talk about ethics and professional obligations around AI usage in legal practice, which is definitely something that you see in the press, in the mainstream press, a lot. This is really on the cutting edge, and it's going to be an interesting and rich discussion. So while we, and then just one other thing to the audience before we kick off, we're going to have a presentation on Supio at the end, I believe, from Ed. And also, if you have questions, let us know in the chat function, the Q&A function. We will address them the best we can as we go. I like to do these real time. Let's start. And finally, what makes even more interesting, we have a truly international panel today. We have Americans, we have Canadians, we have Brits, and we have Anglo-Canadians like me when it suits me, I say, but I do live in Canada, so and have Canadian accent, I guess. So we'll put me in the Canadian part of Anglo-Canadian. So this is going to be a really interesting take on what this looks like across North America. First of all, what are the key drivers and trends that you see at play, Andrew, in your practice at Learners right now, based here in Ontario?
So, I mean, this would apply not just to Ontario, the first point, and you alluded to it briefly, but the fact that uh, virtually every jurisdiction that I'm aware of, personal injury law is practiced on a contingency fee basis. It's an outcome-based fee. It's not an hourly rated fee. And while I still think AI and these digital tools have enormous application for my defense colleagues and the insurers that they work with, I think it's particularly valuable in our plaintiff personal injury space because we want to get from A to Z, or if we're in America, we want to get from A to Z as quickly as we can, as efficiently as we can, and our compensation is not anchored to the time in the file, it's anchored to our outcome. And so if we can achieve better outcomes because we've had access to AI assisted research, or because we've had access to AI assisted evaluation of thousands of pages of medical documents, or because we've had AI assistance in communicating with our own clients, all of that helps us to achieve our ultimate goal for our clients. So that's the first driver, is that you need to do this just because it makes sense from a pocketbook kind of perspective, and it aligns with the client's interest. More specific to my jurisdiction, which is Ontario, and so this wouldn't necessarily apply outside of Ontario, we're undergoing a comprehensive review of the rules of civil procedure. The last one was done in 1985, and so a long time has passed. Many things have changed since 1985. And while we do not yet have the details, all of the early indications suggest that there will be a lot of emphasis put on plaintiff counsel and their clients up front to generate documents, share witness statements, provide summaries and information in a very labor intensive and potentially expensive fashion if you're not doing it through the assistance of some of these tools. So I don't want to monopolize the whole talk. So those are just two primary points as I see them, and maybe some of my other points will filter their way through the rest of our discussions.
Absolutely. I promise we will come back to you, Andrew. So Stacie, you're in North Carolina. You work with all kinds of personal injury law firms of all shapes and sizes, mainly in the US, I believe, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Work,
Yep, that's correct.
at US, but plenty to do there. So tell us, like, what are the three key drivers and trends that you see at play right now across the personal injury ecosystem, and anything else you want to add on that?
Yeah, so first, I'm going to agree completely with Andrew. I think the same thing exists with USPI firms is that you're looking to improve overall speed, efficiency, and quality to become, even more profitable. So 100%, every firm wants that. The AI tools are helping us get there. Second, what's come up a lot now is case conversion. So, you spend millions of dollars on marketing, you need those to convert intake. So intake has been a real focus as of late, the last, well, intake is always a focus, but the last several months about utilizing different AI tools for intake. So there's some extremes of, looking at voice AI agents to do overnight intakes or after hours, or even rollovers during the day. There's kind of two different schools of thought on that. One is that it's better than nothing, better than not having anyone answer your phone overnight. The other is, some believe that these voice AIs are actually better than some of the humans. I'm tend to think that the humans are still the best for client facing, but there are other intake AI tools that have been fantastic to assist the humans while doing an intake, where they're like real time giving them feedback about additional questions they should ask, or kind of vetting out if it is a case that you want to take and you want to convert, giving actual like sales points to help convert these cases. So intake has been a huge focus. And then I think the standard that I think every firm is doing currently is, using AI tools for summarizing medical records and doing cron jobs and putting demands together. I think we're way past that now. I think that's still fantastic and it's a great tool. But I think we're now looking at, because of the success of that, we're looking at AI way beyond that. And just like Andrew, I could go on forever. But I also, want to say that what's become important for, a lot of other factors in the firm as a whole is being able to use AI to look across cases rather than just within a particular case. So you have your own kind of rich inventory within your own firm. And the AI tools are making that so invaluable.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you, Stacie. So, Ed, as with Stacie, you're working on the leading edge of a leading edge AI company, not only in personal injury, but also in the legal sector writ large at Supio. So you're really seeing this evolution in action on the ground. What are your observations on the core drivers and trends that are going on right now in personal injury?
Well, I think about it in the driver of tech adoption. Law firms have always been the worst at innovating, and generative AI has, pushed this forward like never before, and it's because clients use AI, but also because lawyers and paralegals use AI too. It's become something so readily available, and everybody understands its power for the most part. And so I think the adoption curve has been just incredible in that respect. So over the last 3 years, those historic early adopters, of course, been there, but other firms have realized an opportunity to demonstrate that they can be modern too. So they're jumping on the bandwagon, and these days, the firms I meet are more sophisticated buyers. They've gone through a few cycles of testing, and they come to it more educated than ever before. So definitely on that side of things, we can see this really moving quickly, and in the same way that people have access to the incredible tools that are being released at sort of breakneck speed, at sort of the Claudes and the Geminis and ChatGPT levels, it opens up opportunities for a company like ours to introduce new features on a monthly basis as well. So Stacie talked about cross-case analysis, which is something that we're doing with our firms too, in agentic intake as well. These things have been a pipe dream for law firms. They would have loved to analyze that data to understand the performance of their lawyers on specific cases, so they can route their cases to the right lawyer, things like that. Or on the intake side, being able to understand at scale how they perform, or how their individuals perform on calls, and how they choose the right cases. So these things across the board, we're all witnessing clients respond to us using ChatGPT for better or worse, and this is driving us along forward. And of course, Andrew talked about the kind of changes that are happening at the sort of court level, and we'll get into kind of the ethics of it as well. But it's an exciting time.
Absolutely, and you're in an exciting place. And one other question, when you talk about the folks that you're selling this technology to, you mean, to what extent do you really need to be tech savvy to buy a tool like Supio? Like, how much, how easy is it for people to get their heads around it and start applying it in their practices to get results?
Well, I may chuck this over the fence to Daniel, but I think previous legal technology is kind of like looking into a airplane cockpit, buttons everywhere, and today, because I kind of liken it sometimes to the way that Apple introduced their stores to retail. You're like, this is a crazy new experience. It's also how I witnessed cannabis stores in America. They're like, this is different. And I think, in the way that OpenAI designed ChatGPT, it's just a chat interface. It's so new in terms of how we use technology. So I think right there, it's so much easier. But you also have to paint a picture. These when faced with a chat interface, you're going to have people being like, what can I do here? And really, you're only limited by imagination. But even for me, when Claude came out with Claude Cowork, I started to bug my colleague to say, what can you do with this? And once he showed me, I was like, away to the races. But you need that Sherpa, and Daniel's our Sherpa.
All right. So Daniel, when you're helping personal injury attorneys climb through those Himalayan peaks to the top of the tech stack, what are your observations that's going on with the end users? Because that you're the person when the rubber hits the road, and Ed's done all the hard work of selling Supio into these firms, and then you got to make it happen for them. And I understand that well from my days in the financial technology world at Bloomberg. You got to get people to use it, and you got to get them to continue to use it, and you got to get them to see its potential. So tell us about what you're seeing in your role with the firms you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's where having someone in my position, a customer success manager, or a technology expert on the software that you buy, is so important, because from what I'm seeing is there's a whole range, right, of some of maybe the longer tooth attorneys that have been around for 30, 40 years who are kind of stuck in their ways to the lawyers that just got out of law school maybe a month or 2 months ago, right, and are still working to get that certification and pass the bar in the United States, as it would be. And so for us, it's really switched from like, okay, in the past year, it started as there's a lot of hype around AI, but I don't really know what its potential is. And now it's shifted to, okay, I understand the bottleneck of where my cases are getting stuck. I know AI can solve it, but how is that done? And so my job is, as a Sherpa, is to carry the weight of the technology and meet people where they're at, right? I can show a tool to someone and they're going to get that exact workflow, right? And that's maybe the only thing that they use. But as we start to move across the firm into different paralegals, legal assistants to attorneys, understanding where they are at in the technology and how comfortable they are with, and then focusing on one specific area that they need solved. And then as you continue to solve that problem, they start kind of venturing on into the different areas of the platform. And then you start real adoption from a deep, wide firm level.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, I mean, with Supio, it's probably a pretty hard platform to break. It has enough controls and guardrails rails in place. Like again, my time when I was at Bloomberg, it was like, do whatever you want on the Bloomberg terminal. You can't break it. You're not gonna cause a global financial crisis part two here by trying something else here on this technology. So is that the same? I mean, you've got these guardrails in place. It encourages innovation, encourages people to use it as their sandbox to figure out the problem sets they have.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that goes two ways. You're not going to break the system, right? But there are guardrails that may not be as obvious that we need to rely on someone in my position to help them understand, especially in the legal profession where precision is paramount, right? Like you need to be accurate in what you are relaying to your clients, what you're relaying to the opposing counsel, what you're turning into the courts. And so understanding where some of the AI technology can hit blind spots is key and critical so that you know what to look for when. And that's as simple as a conversation of like, hey, try everything that you want, but if it's something new, keep me in the loop so that I can look at the output with you, so I can understand what you're trying to get and how to work best within that system. But as Ed said it best, right? You're only limited by your imagination with AI. And then if you give me your imagination, I can help tailor that to a specific output that's going to produce what you want.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Daniel. So David, you know all about legal tech. You've been in this game for a long time. Well, a while, not that long.
Easy.
Yeah. You obviously have worked at different firms before. Learners is a firm that does more than only personal injury in terms of its practice area focus. So how are you seeing personal injury adoption and what's going on with the technology as different compared to other practice areas? And also as a legal tech expert, how are you seeing this evolve in terms of people's roles and how they do their work and their value proposition as attorneys and lawyers across the profession, but maybe specifically for personal injury? Where are you seeing, folks like your colleague Andrew really driving that value if the technology can do a lot of the grunt work that they would have had to do in previous years until recently?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll speak generally to the topology and the makeup of the practices at Learner. Certainly, the challenge with deploying and adopting AI across different practice disciplines isn't necessarily access to the technology. It's integrating it in meaningful ways across those different groups. They often have very different workflows, very different risk profiles. You're dealing with inconsistent data capture processes, systems that weren't designed with AI in mind. systems that might be 1999 level technology that's just sort of core to the whole practice. On top of that, adoption ultimately comes down to whether lawyers see real value in their day-to-day work. I like to joke that I have two tools to drive change at a law firm. I have selling and I have telling, and I almost never get to tell the lawyers what to do. So for us, the focus has been less on the technology necessarily itself and more on building the right foundation of skills and competencies and really just improving how we sort of coach our firm members into asking the right questions to capture the right data, and then later on fold in how AI can support that work in ways that genuinely enhance the service delivery experience. For PI specifically, though, and to Andrew's point that it is an outcome-based model, AI really raises the ceiling in terms of capacity and throughput and how many files a practice might be able to carry, an individual practitioner might be able to carry. Certainly, if using advanced data analysis and sort of communication there, if you can render an outcome for your clients all the more quickly, that increases in your available capacity, and you can reinvest that time dividend into the next client relationship or developing the next client case.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too, right? There was and I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on this sort of the people element and the role and value of attorneys in with their clients. It doesn't have to be sort of personal injury. But there's an article in the New York Times, I think it came out yesterday, it was quite interesting about the folks who are doing really well in the AI era are the people who are people who are able to interpret this. They're interviewing some people from the Big Four, and they said, the people who are the most valuable at KPMG, for example. I think that was a firm. I shouldn't quote it or not. You can check the article if you have access. What were the people who are good with clients, the people who are good at interpreting all of this information that everyone's able to sort of collect now and have something think about for them and interpret that to their clients and interpret that to the world. So this role of attorneys in that context, how do you see that evolving in terms of what areas they should be focused on? Stacie, what's your take on this? You probably think about this quite a bit.
For sure. And you raised a good point about the human element. I think it makes any good attorney, any good paralegal, a super paralegal or super attorney. This is where we have to kind of get past that fear of AI replacing people, because I think that inhibits AI adoption in law firms. So if we can really show people immediate value to them being able to do what they're best at, which is usually kind of client-facing things or really like taking the information and interpreting how you're going to use it. That's where we're going to gain the most benefit from AI, not necessarily to replace all humans. We will be able to handle more with less. But one of the fantastic things we're looking at with AI is predictive outcomes for your cases. So, now again, looking across cases and across your own platform and all this rich data that you have, you can get very granular in, predictive outcomes of cases with similar fact patterns. Could be based on your own data because you're in a closed AI system where you can see even down to a specific insurance company, a specific adjuster, a specific defense counsel, kind of your percentage possibility of a win if you went all the way to trial. So there's just the possibilities are endless, and I think people are really leaning into what more they can do with it.
Yeah. Andrew, what about you?
I wanted to jump in and let me strip it down because I think maybe some of the folks who are viewing this webinar are interested and haven't really been dipping their toes in. So that's maybe Stacie's at a higher level order there. But let me strip it down to sort of at its most basic. My initial interaction with a new client, once I know the conflict check is cleared, I'll do that meeting. I'm now using an AI tool to prepare a memo of that meeting. So I'm now, and so these are all done virtually, essentially. So I'm looking through the screen. I'm talking to my client. My head is not down. I'm not typing notes. I'm not writing notes. I'm having a conversation. I can let that conversation go where the evidence takes me. I have a framework in my mind. And when that meeting is done, within minutes of the meeting being over, I send them out a duplicate memo of what I have in my file. I ask them, does it look correct? Is there any information that is missing or that this triggers you to think, oh, I should have told Andrew this? And then it comes out within 5 minutes of the meeting being over. I don't have to stop and dictate my reporting letter or my memo to file. My assistant no longer has to transcribe that. What would maybe be a few days turnaround time, theoretically, is completed within just a few minutes. And it makes me look like I'm really on top of things. And quite frankly, the content of these types of memos prepared with an AI assistance are more detailed and more accurate than what my memo would be. And at the beginning, I was shocked. I didn't realize, I have a section, summarize what Andrew's initial advice was, and it goes through, and I was actually shocked at how detailed I was. I'm kind of patting myself on the back in a manner of speaking, but I didn't realize, just as a matter of course, I went through so many things. And of course, it's helpful to have that tucked in your file as well. Should there ever be a complaint that you didn't share some of this information, you have it. So there's a bit of a protection element as well. But on its face, it really just makes you look good. It makes you look like you really know what you're talking about with your client. It enhances their experience. And as I see it, it's very relationally driven, so that if your client trusts you, has confidence in you, they're going to accept your advice much more readily, and it'll just be a much more positive experience for both you and your client. And that's just at a very basic entry level. We're not talking about fancy AI here. This is something everyone can and should be doing right now.
Yeah. Are you scared about your role as a lawyer in the future, Andrew?
I'm sorry, you just cut out just briefly for me there.
Yeah. Are you scared about your role, your job as a lawyer in the
I'm not. I just think it will, like the people who are good at what they're doing, it'll turbocharge them, and it may separate some of the dabblers from the rest of the crowd, and that's probably a good thing from the client's perspective. So no, I'm not worried one bit about how this is going to negatively affect lawyers. I think it's going to positively affect lawyers.
Yeah, and we can see that in your enthusiasm for this topic. Someone asked, did I give the second word? Not quite yet. It's automation. It's for CLE. So automation is the second word. Automation. So Daniel, Ed, rounding out this sort of people part of this conversation, the role of lawyers in the future and attorneys, depending on where you are, what you call them. Ed, what's your take? Are you scared for the future of the legal profession?
No, I agree with Andrew. I think it's better for clients, because if we look at the legal profession and it as a whole in general, I mean, how many people do they really serve that is actually addressing the entire legal market? And the issue there is the perception of the cost. And so we have an opportunity with this technology to give more options to the public in terms of how we service them. So no, and the thing is as well is I speak to lawyers every day, and I don't think one of them would say that hiring is easy for them. And so, like, what does that tell you? It tells you that there's capacity within these firms for technology to assist. So, I think Stacie was absolutely right, that need to get out of the fear of the job conversation, because I think this is about making a job more pleasant. Ultimately, leave early to go pick up the kids, God forbid. I mean, spend your weekends on your own time. So, I think that impact is all positive. I think it will change roles, and people have talked about that already. Well, for those trial lawyers, I think you're going to become even more valuable. I don't think anybody's going to be chucking you out. I think those skills are going to be absolutely valuable. And it's just about how we train people. That's where my head goes at. Junior lawyers today. When I was practicing, I had my ruler out, or my kind of partner was like, "Get your ruler out, go line by line." I don't think we need to hang out by the copier for so long in learning that job, but it's like how are firms thinking about it? Luckily for Andrew and David, they as a firm they kind of have the resources to do this, but for firms that aren't so lucky, you've got the folks like Stacie out there to make sure people understand what to do.
All right, thanks, Ed. So Daniel, as the AI Sherpa, that's your role on this call. And the first word transformation was for someone had a question in the audience for CLE. Daniel, are you seeing more joy in attorneys who are using Supio's platform? Are you experiencing joy? I don't know, it was a Marie Kondo or whatever. Does using Supio give them joy, or using AI give them more joy in their lives? Are you noticing that?
Once I have that aha moment from a lawyer or a paralegal, a legal assistant, then you get the joy, right? And in my world, an aha moment is when you solve a problem or you solve a workflow issue that they were dealing with before. Much like attorneys, lawyers, your job is to advocate for your clients. My job is to advocate for the attorneys, the lawyers, and the paralegals that I work for. So getting to that aha moment is when you start to bring the joy. When I've seen kind of the adoption thrive when utilizing AI is when the leading partner, the managing partners really emphasize that this is not here to replace you. It is here to make you better. Right. And even at like the downstream level, when you're looking at your paralegals or kind of the case managers that are working really the grunt side of the case, when they understand that those menial tasks that take them hours and hours to do and aren't fun and suck the joy out of their day to day is solved so that they can learn new skills and improve their skill set and start moving up and through the ranks, that's when we start to get true adoption, as opposed to some of the leaders that I've worked with that are like, hey, we're looking to replace. Right. And that's always where I come in and say, hey, no, we need to have a completely different mindset here on taking the talent that you have currently and up leveling them into ways that are going to make your attorneys more successful and thus your business more successful.
Yeah.
I would just add on top of that the other question that I ask lawyers is like, what don't you have a chance to do in your daily work? Because it's probably you find because you're so busy, you don't do a bunch of things that you should. Maybe summarizing transcripts from a deposition, from examination. The things that lawyers tell me are, there's nothing more boring than sitting in an examination deposition than actually having to read it. And they sit on the corner of a desk, and the lawyers knows they're going to have to get to it probably on Sunday afternoon. But now, Supio does that job of helping them to digest it. So I think when I pose that question, so often lawyers are like, well, there's tons of stuff I don't do. Maybe it didn't matter, but maybe it would have helped you build a stronger case.
Let's move on to data. 10 years ago, data was the new oil, and the data-driven law firm. I'm sure there's multiple books written on that. You can look up on Amazon, but the role and the power of data in the AI era is different. I mean, everyone's become a super user of Excel, or have the potential, if they want to be a super user of Excel. And so, Stacie, when you're talking about this sort of data that's flowing out, the use of AI tools, or what AI tools can do for personal injury firms with data, how do you make that sort of concrete for folks in the audience about some, working edges here? If you think about your data this way, you can achieve this result, because this is a results-driven webinar. It's a personal injury focused webinar. We are in the results business on this one. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit already, so you have all this rich data and, what are you going to do with that? That's always been the point. people are using all these different case management systems, and we have all these data points that we're capturing, but what are we actually doing with that data? With AI tools, the possibilities are endless. But what some of the best things that we're doing with it are, getting better results on cases by being able to have some predictive factors in what has worked, what has not worked, what are all the factors that we haven't thought of, insurance company adjuster, complete fact patterns of any case, to actually get better results. That's where that kind of quality piece comes in. We've talked a lot about, improving the speed at which a case settles, but this is where the quality part comes in, where you can actually get more quality arguments on any case, and kind of getting predictors on which cases should go to trial for potentially a better result, which ones can get a better result negotiating pre-litigation. Data analytics for financial projections for the firm. That's a huge thing. What is our projections based on the cases that we have, for, do we have more money to invest in marketing next quarter, next year? There's a lot that goes into it that you have all this rich data that for many years has not been fully utilized. These AI tools are going to completely change the game for the firms that are actually leaning into it and seeing the bigger picture.
Where would you suggest someone is, say, I have this big data lake sitting in my law firm and I don't even know what to do with it? What would you tell them as a first step to dip their toe into the data lake?
Oh my God, it's too exciting. Um, my background when I first changed from I worked in the insurance industry, and then when I first moved to law firm work, I went in as a negotiator. So, my first thing is thinking again, all that rich data of if I had that at my fingertips, what kind of results could I have gotten as a negotiator if I kind of knew, this particular insurance company usually raises by this percentage, or this fact pattern is hurting me or could help me if I mentioned this. What if there was a mention in the records, or in the notes that I, as the negotiator, didn't see because I didn't read through maybe every single note of the case? But if I had an AI summary that showed me kind of the real life effects on my client, again, this is advocating more for your client, getting all this possibility of what you can argue on a case. That's kind of my initial thought as I go back to my roots is negotiating and getting better results. And if I had had this kind of things at my fingertips 20 years ago, man, and I think I did great as a negotiator, but wow, again, could have made me a super negotiator. We could have gotten even better results. So, I think I start there as I start with, what can we do for our clients? We've talked a lot about, what we can do to make kind of work-life balance easier, better for our staff. But ultimately, every law firm, their primary goal is doing right by the client. And I think when you have this rich data and you're not using it, then you're not doing right by your clients.
Right, and we'll talk about that on the ethics part in part 3 here. We have the third word. While we have a little bit of a space here before I ask David the next question. So the third word is efficiency, following automation. So the third word is efficiency. David, again, you've been in the business for a while. You've heard all the superlatives and platitudes about the potential of data for law firms. And now you finally have the tools at your fingertips to really make sense of it, to add value to the firm. What's your take on data, and how would you suggest folks in the audience think about how they approach this?
It's a big question. At Learners, we're trying to position ourselves in such a way where data is the foundation of how our legal services are deployed to our clients. They continue to evolve, and they are not something separate and distinct from the practice of law. Firms are generating data constantly. I like to remark that the best time that we should have started our master data management or big data strategy was 5 years ago, because we've been harvesting and collecting all of this information all that time. And now the compute is available to really probe at depth and explore and really leverage a lot of that data. But it starts at intake. It starts at the beginning of the matter. The way you identify your clients, the way you capture information and structure your intake has an outsized impact on everything else that follows. I think Stacie mentioned the ability to perform case assessments as rapidly as possible. I mean, that is absolutely something in this day and age when we have deeply resourced rosters of teams and always looking to capture as many files as possible. So it's like, where on the roster is there alignment of expertise and capacity and experience for this particular type of file? Similarly, the ongoing commercialization of legal services is something that we pay attention to. There are entities here in Canada who have deployed solutions that allow the general public to, or not the, injured parties in the general public to provide a minimum amount of information and gain sort of a first perspective of what a settlement in their geography might look like. What is the history of claims and settlements in that area for a particular type of injury? And that's really just turning that information back around and empowering our clients to make better choices, more informed choices, and ultimately arrive at satisfying outcomes more quickly.
Can I just add something to that, Andrew?
Please.
So one of my clerks who's become very proficient at the use of AI splits her time with also doing work in our human resources department. And so she, on her own initiative, deployed AI tools to assist in an analysis of all of the dockets of the clerks and assistants so that she could use that data in a meaningful way to truly understand how much time is consumed doing certain tasks, how much time is consumed with professional development, which all of us must have, and then you can look at what are the averages, and you can use, and then she used this to help develop, because we didn't have actually a very good job description of what do people do from sort of on the human resources end of things. So she then used AI to develop comprehensive and very accurate and detailed job descriptions for the positions that the people hold. And then this information is used for compensation purposes. We can also measure folks against statistically averaged benchmarks, because we now have the average of sort of all of the clerking population or all of the assistants. And she told me, Andrew, it would have been physically impossible for me to do this without having you. I just could not have done it. There would be no way I could ever have done this. And so I like to provide like very specific and tangible examples to our audience. There's lots of things we can speak of in the generic, but I just know, as a matter of fact, we did this, and it was one person doing it, and it couldn't have been done really by a team of people any other way.
Yeah, great case study. So we have a few questions about the words, so I'm just going to say one more time. I'll say all four: transformation, automation, efficiency, and you have to wait for the last one, but I promise I'll give it to you at 12:55 Eastern. So that's transformation, automation, and efficiency. Those are the CLE words. Words with friends. Okay, so on the data piece, Ed and Daniel, anything you want to talk about here before we move on to the ethics piece, which is really interesting, and we might run a few minutes over because it's such an interesting topic.
Well, I think what's exciting about technology like ours is that we're a fact gathering machine. That's really what we are when it boils down to it. We build our systems to read medical records that are higher accuracy level than humans. Like, that's kind of like our goal, and we do that by schematizing medical records, and we do that with humans, by the way. We look at the medical record and we point to where data points need to be extracted, and then that goes into our processing machine. So now our technology has the ingredients on how to read medical records, and we've been doing this for 4 years. So we now have a nice big moat that makes it highly defensible. We've done that for medical bills as well, trying to read those documents, because ultimately these are really tough problems to solve. And in doing that, we now have this machine that helps to extract facts and populate them into a medical chronology or populating a case details dashboard, drafting documents. But as we become so good at it, we help our systems of truth like Litify or Smart Advocate, all these practice management systems, populate their own data. And now that we have that data layer and it's all nicely organized, we can ask questions of it. And that's kind of the stage we're at now with cross-case analysis, where, you know, firms that may have a lot of data in Supio could be searching across their data set to see where clients may be a candidate in a mass tort. Perhaps they've been taking Depo-Provera, and this is a way to identify these people and let them know that they may have a cause of action here. So, but again, your imagination is just your limiter when it comes to being able to mine that type of data across your business, and it opens up so many fascinating opportunities.
Thanks, Ed. Daniel, data.
Yeah, I think I'll speak the evil word here, which is kind of data, or two words, data hygiene, right? In the fact that, like, hey, the more organized that your data is on those practice management systems, the case management systems, the better results you're going to get from utilizing tools like AI. Now, Supio is very powerful in the fact that it can help organize the documents, maybe in a practice management system that's kind of just thrown in together. But the more that you organize the files beforehand, the better outputs that you're going to get with the use of AI, right? You can think of it in that standpoint that, like, I can remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but there's a lot of data I have to go back to remember what I had for breakfast 3 months ago or 4 months ago. And so the easier you're able to organize your data into a manner when we're using tools like AI in specifically prompting and drafting, and being able to quickly find the relevant documents, the relevant data points that you're looking to build, whatever type of document, whatever product, or answer whatever question you're looking for, the faster results that you're going to have on the back end. Now, AI has done a great job, and Supio is phenomenal at helping you organize that data. But from what I've seen in the firms that are quickly adopting and quickly able to kind of build workflows in, that data hygiene portion is tight from the beginning.
Yeah. Listen to the AI Sherpa. Bad data in is bad data out. Okay, let's move on to
the technologist in me wanted to say, as step one with your data, normalize it. Normalize it. That's the first step. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Yes.
Please, thank you. Yes.
And you can reach out to David, Daniel, Ed, anyone here in the audience. They'll tell you about how to have a good structured data and a hygienic data strategy. But very important point. Thanks, Daniel. Okay, I want to move on to ethics and professional obligations. So one thing that we are observing in the sector writ large, the legal sector writ large, is this tension, and you get it from the state bars and announcements of the like that say you need to be using AI as much as you can in your practice to provide better services to your clients and more access to justice, because that's good for the end user and good for society, etc. Good for the rule of law. At the same time, when you use those tools, make sure they don't mess up and you don't end up in the New York Times and lose your license. But I joke, but this is something that must be a really hard balancing act for attorneys to think about. I have to use this all the time, but I don't entirely trust it because it does hallucinate sometimes, or it does give me the wrong information. And on top of that, and I think this is probably especially the case, but I'm not sure it's the case just in consumer focused law like personal injury or family law. You have a whole world of clients who know even more than you do as very experienced attorneys, because they can go into Claude or they can go into ChatGPT and they can point out all the things you're doing wrong as an attorney on your side, or how you can approach the case on their behalf better. I want to, that's a lot to tackle. We might go a little bit past time, but Andrew, I want to start with you first. How do you balance that sort of tension between having to use AI, having to check AI, and then also on top of that, you have a bunch of other folks, your clients, using AI too. And I know there's a case being heard right now in the US about this exact thing, right? You're waiving privilege if you're using AI on your own case. Well, that's like catnip to people who are having to deal with this in their daily lives, right? It must be almost impossible not to ask ChatGPT, what should I do?
I'm
So
sorry,
tell-
was that directed to me, Andrew? I
That's
just,
directed to you, Andrew. Yeah,
yeah.
those 3 points.
Yeah. So one of the things I did wearing my hat as chair of the Digital Leadership Committee was I actually sent out an email to all of the lawyers in the firm asking and soliciting from them examples of AI misuse that they'd seen in their respective practices. So this would be solicitors and litigators. I didn't really get any solicitors giving me feedback on it, but the litigators talked about a number of things that are very concerning. One certainly relates to the loss of privilege. So if you've had your client now take a draft version of a report or other documents or their own medical records and fed them into something that is not a contained location, you do run the risk that now any sense of privilege has been lost. So I think the onus is on the lawyers. They have to not only educate themselves and their team about how should we be doing things, you have to educate your client as well. Another example that was revealed was some people said to me, we've got instances where it's clear that our own expert or the expert of from the opposing counsel, the expert is using AI to write large portions of their paper. And what does that mean? Is it really their opinion? I mean, was it done in a way that simply helped them? Or was it done in a way where it's actually not the opinion of the expert at all, but it's the opinion of a generative AI tool? So that raises a really big concern. You don't want to be caught on the wrong side of that. And if you identify it, you want to make sure that you use that and deal with it to protect your client. One of the lawyers gave an example. It wasn't even in the legal sphere. It was one of the big 5 accounting firms. I think they're probably the same big 5 in Canada as they are in the United States. And they did a consulting project for one of our provinces. And it was revealed that, enormous parts of that were all done by AI. And they had to give back the money that they had taken in as their fee. It was deeply embarrassing for that big 5 accounting firm. So it's not just sole practitioners that can, get themselves caught out. And I've actually thought that the accountants have been ahead of the legal profession on all of this, but they can still get caught as well. I had someone tell me that the response that they got, the person had been maintaining essentially what they called a diary of their symptoms, complaints, and problems in a personal injury context. What was in the form of they were chatting with ChatGPT. I woke up with a headache today. I lashed out at my partner. We had a fight, and it's because I'm not feeling well. And then ChatGPT says, "Oh, that's a terrible thing that's happened to you." And what do you do if they have no longer recorded this information in a diary, the old-fashioned handwritten diary, but now it's where an AI agent is egging them on. You should do something about that, or if it was a medical negligence complaint, that doctor should never have asked you that question or should never have done that. That's a real problem for how do you deal with it? And I don't necessarily have the answers, but I think you have to be aware. You have to know that all of these things are going on. Of course, you have to make sure you're not getting caught with hallucinations. So you have to have best practices to actually read any link, any source that it says that it's relying on. You have to go back and actually look at it as well. We haven't said it yet, so it's worth saying for people, who are viewing this. The same way you wouldn't have your articling student or your intern, prepare something, and now you're presenting it at the Court of Appeal and you haven't reviewed it. You would never do that. You should also never do that with any of the AI generated content. It's meant to be an aid to speed up the process, never a substitute for deep and contemplative human oversight.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a great term. Not a substitute for deep and contemplative human oversight. I think that could be applied to the AI era as a whole across sectors. Okay, so back by popular demand, I'll give all 4 words one more time to everybody: transformation, automation, efficiency, and strategy. That's transformation, automation, efficiency, and strategy. So those are the 4 words for your CLE credits. I hope you all stick around a little longer. Stacie, how are you approaching this sort of ethical complexity that's spun out by AI with having to be efficient, having to manage risk on the other side, and then you've got a whole client base who can do all kinds of interesting and weird and wonderful things with all the information and all the hard work you're doing for them as an attorney?
Yeah. So it's actually great timing for this and an important question that everyone should be examining in their law firms. Our own COO here at Maestro recently wrote an article for Pilma magazine on this topic, with 3 practical steps that all law firms should be doing. Is 1, making sure you have an AI use policy in your firm. It should outline, and again, this is part of the education of your own staff, so separate from educating your clients, certainly educating your own staff, the difference between open AI and closed AI, and resisting that urge to throw your clients' medical records in Chat GPT because your firm doesn't yet have a closed AI, system. The second thing is professional prompt engineering. So we didn't talk too much about this, but prompt engineering in every AI is so important. It will help kind of lessen biases that come out. That could be detrimental to your cases, and also kind of limit inaccuracies as well. So you'd want within your own firm senior counsel to devise what those professional prompt engineering should be, and make sure that your staff is utilizing it. And the third thing would be continuous ethics education pertaining to AI. So you need to know in your jurisdiction, has anything changed and what the courts are allowing or not allowing as far as AI usage? And it should be a monthly audit of what the current AI ethics policies are. So those are 3 practical things that firms can do right now.
Great takeaways. Thanks. So final, because I know people have meetings to go to. Transformation is the first word. Automation, efficiency, strategy, word 4.
Andrew, could I just jump back in on Stacie's comment about bias, because we don't always talk about that quite as much as we should, and so I wanted to give an example that I had from my own experience. Early on, when I was using ChatGPT, I had it generate an image for me that I could pair with my PowerPoint presentation, and so I told it I wanted to have an image of Atticus Finch delivering a talk to a crowd of people and sort of, in his era of time. And it gave me an image. There were only men in the crowd, no women. And there was only white people in the crowd. There was nobody of any other characterization other than Caucasian people. And so I asked it, I pointed this out, and it gave me some women. It still didn't give me any diversity, though. And so that if you're not aware of that, you could just use that without even thinking that it's not really actually representative of what you're trying to do. And that, I'm sure, was just a built-in bias and that was in an early version of ChatGPT. That's just like a very simple example of a bias in our system.
Yeah, it goes back to what you're saying before about, you just trust this blind trust in this system. In reality, it's like, you wouldn't let a junior associate, you read their work before you go to court. So why do you all of a sudden trust the machine? But that's a different topic for another time. So I know we're running out of time here, and Ed, I just want to check, or Daniel, if you want to do a brief presentation for those who are still listening, and we'll have to do another one on ethics on this topic, and we have tons of stuff we didn't talk about today. But I don't know if there's a SUPIO presentation. I might be wrong.
I could do a little 5 minutes. I just put into the chat that case you mentioned it out of New York, where a lawyer was using Claude to test his analysis on a case, and so saying general models should beware of using general models, otherwise you might remove your, what did you call it, Andrew? Pierce something on privilege or something like that.
Pierce the privilege bubble, or pierce.
Yeah,
that's right.
So,
all right. Well, so rather than I'll just jump into SUPIO's portal here. We've got a motor vehicle case. I'll just take a step back. we build our system around the case. Supio's North Star is the accident. So we bind it to those case facts, and then its universe is the case documents it has access to. So that's what we talk about when having a closed system. We actually just announced our integration with Westlaw Advantage, so that's very cool. And if you can imagine being able to analyze your case and case law in the same place while you're drafting your factum or your mediation brief, it's going to be pretty powerful. And in predominantly I speak to Canadian firms these days. Our drafting tools are getting mediation memos out in about 10 minutes, and people say they're about 85% there. So they're just polishing it off in an hour, and then instead of 10 or 20 hours of distracted human time. What I'm going to do, there's a lot to cover in Supio. I'm not going to do it all today, but as we talked about prompting, I'm going to jump into our AI assistant, which looks like ChatGPT, right? Because we intentionally did that so people are comfortable with it. And I just did this prompt a second ago to show how easy prompting is, to say, I'm Eli's lawyer. This is Eli Strauss. This is the guy who's got hit, rear-ended. I'm coming late to this file. I'm an experienced trial lawyer. Create 3 prompts to help me get my arms around this case and the next steps. Analyze the deposition or experts within it, and craft questions for the defendant with mousetraps. I've just fired off this, and Supio came back with some prompts for me. So case overview, strategic assessment, expert deposition analysis, defendant deposition question with traps. So I wanted to do this because I'm just showing you that you don't have to be a prompt engineer to create these prompts. You could just get Supio to do it for you. And then I ran these prompts. So here, actually, no, just before I ran these prompts, I did one other prompt, which is the get to know me question. I said, I don't know this case, and the client is just called. Help me get to know them. And I think this is it's equally as powerful. If you're on a holiday and you're relying on your colleagues to handle your caseload without you, your Supio can quickly, in 2 minutes, help you understand a person's case and give that client care to somebody you've never spoken to in your life. And then Supio will give you some follow-up prompts as well to help you to continue the conversation. We also have a prompt library that you can curate together. But let's dive into one of these prompts. So executive summary. I'll just run through this one. So here, I've asked Supio to give me an executive summary of this case, including the mechanism of injury and liability picture, a breakdown of which injuries are clearly incident-related versus pre-accident versus aggravated, the total medical specials with provider breakdown, any red flags or problem areas I need to address, your recommended next steps for case development. So here we're going to get the overview of the accident. We've got our citations as well to make us feel good about the data we're looking at. We can go check those. We see some liability assessment here. Critical liability issue. Accident report documents that Mr. Strauss's trailer was observed protruding into the travel lane. Okay, something to be wary of. Coverage appears limited to 50K. Clearly incident-related injuries. Nice table for us to digest this. Aggravated pre-existing conditions. We've got this cervical radiculopathy. Always struggle with that one, so I try and practice it every time I can. Pre-existing and unrelated condition, medical specials breakdown. This is important because Supio surfaces financial data within the medical records, and not just what was billed, but what was adjusted, paid for by whom, and what's outstanding. We do a lot of work there to enable Supio to surface this data accurately, because large language models struggle en masse. Estimated incident-related medical specials, red flags and problem areas. So as a lawyer coming in, I want to know about these things, these issues right from the jump. So I'm not scrambling around in the weeds of the records. I'm going straight to the action, and I can put my skills to good use. And if we could look at this quote, for example, let's see where this comes up. Okay, nice. It's been highlighted in the passage of the document. You know, our motto at Supio is trust. Trust Supio, but verify. You know, trust us enough, but you're the lawyer here. You should be verifying this data yourself. And, you know, I won't go into it, but the conversation around ethics is really like AI assisted versus AI generated. It's AI assisted and you're checking and verifying, then you're on the right track. Secondary concerns, recommended next steps. So in 5 minutes, I'm across this case. Maybe I've just received this case and it's been in litigation a while. I'm getting right into it, you know, and then I can go straight into talking to the client, seeing where they're at. But we can see here the citations. I could turn this into a document. So I just want to touch on that today. There's a lot more to unravel. You can always reach out to us if you want to learn more. But I feel like that's a good starter for 10.
Fantastic. We just set up another poll, so lots of people filled that in. Hopefully this thing they would like to hear from Supio about their services. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. I know we ran a little bit over, but awesome conversation. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ed. And thank you, Stacie.